Julie Lynch serves as Vice President of Talent and Culture for the National Fire Protection Association, and I think she's living the dream of sort of the modern, I guess the modern workforce is that you can sort of be multi-threaded. And so not only does she do that, but she works, working her way sort of, it sounds like, towards consulting and getting her consulting business back up online. And so she's splitting it and doing it all, which I admire anyone that tries to take that on. So without further ado, I present to you Julie Lynch.
Thank you. Can you guys hear me okay? All right. So good afternoon. Yes, I am at National Fire Protection Association in Quincy. Can I just forward through this? Oh, there we go. So our Vice President of Business Operation calls us a 125-year-old startup, and that is what it feels like. We are over 125 years old. And we are acting like a startup. We are changing everything from technology to talent to skill sets to leadership and everything in between. I'm sure many of you guys are working on those same kind of things. And before I kind of get started, I want to ask a question. Of course, many of us in this room are responsible for change efforts, and we might feel very comfortable as a leader of change efforts. But I want you to put on your employee hat for a moment. And I'd like to ask, as an employee, how you feel along the continuum of comfort with change. So over here, at this end of the continuum, we have, gosh, I hope when I wake up tomorrow and arrive to work, they will have changed my job, my boss, my priorities, and perhaps where I sit. That would be awesome, okay? Some people might be there. Over here, we might have folks who are thinking, yeah, I know I lead change, but step off. Nobody changed my stuff, and if you do, I want a full understanding of what you're going to do before you're going to do it, and then I'll decide whether I'm going to do it, and even then, I would prefer a stick in the eye, okay? So raise your hand when I get to your spot, okay? So is anybody here? No? Oh, we got a little up, maybe. Okay, how about here? Okay, good, big change, folks. Anybody here? This is the middle of the road. Don't mind change, but be careful. All right, here. Anybody over here? Yep, a few of you. Don't be shy. Yep, there we go. It's fine. That's fine. There's your representative. That's diversity too, right? Okay. So for those of you kind of paying attention to who raised whose hand, there were a number of you along the entire continuum. And we know that we need to make change efforts and the efforts we make to engage people in change personal. We know that everybody looks at change and hears about change from their own personal worldview, right? So we can talk about the opportunity and the growth opportunity and the transformation we're going to do it, and we're all in it together. And you've got these folks who are all thinking their own little thought bubbles up there. Right? Will I have a new boss? We tried that before. Just ask me, will I keep my desk by the window? You've got all kinds of stuff going on in people's heads. And so we know we need to make it personal, which is a big job, right? I only have 325 people in my organization, which feels to me fairly small. You'd think you could get change efforts going by word of mouth with that level of, with that level of population, but no. We also know that we need to make connections. We need to meet people where they are. We need to tell them the 7-time rule, tell them again, tell them what you told them, then do that again. So we know we need to make connections. And for those of you who do change efforts, this might look familiar. You might try your first connection. Hey, we've got to change. And this is the awareness that we heard of ADCAR earlier today. From Camaria, and this is the awareness. Hey, we're doing some change, and we're really super excited about it, and we hope you are too. And cue the crickets, right? You check in a little while later. Hey, how's that change coming? Right? We talked about it. How is it going? And they're like, what are you talking about? I'm not. What were you talking about a change? Because I don't know what you're talking about. And then you go. I'm sorry, why are we not all on the same page here? Like, now it's like 6 months we've been doing this change thing, and it's not happening, and I'm starting to get a little fussy. And wait a minute, I'm sorry, are you talking to me? You meant me. Oh, you meant me changing. Can you repeat the question, right? So, and then by that time, has anybody been in this situation where you're like, you know what, forget it. This isn't working, and we're gonna need to try something else. Let me stop here for a second. At NFPA, as I mentioned, 125 years, we're a standards development organization, which means that we facilitate the development of standards about fire and life safety. So we're a self-funded, nonprofit organization dedicated to the elimination of loss due to fire and life safety hazards. So we are a mission organization. While we are nonprofit, we are self-funded. So we don't get donations. We actually run a business, and that is how we fund ourselves, through the business of selling our codes and standards and derivative items. And so, you know, kind of at its real basic level, we've been a publisher of standards. So for anybody who's familiar with the National Electric Code, which is about this yay big and about 42 pounds in print, and we're still publishing that. In fact, the latest one just came out last week. So you would think in this day and age that we might be moving to digital. You would be correct. However, when I arrived about 5 years ago, I felt like I had arrived from the future, and I was sharing this really interesting development that had happened in the world called digital information distribution. And it turns out they had been working on it for quite some time, but what had happened was change efforts went like this. And once they got to the top right-hand corner there, they were like, okay, this isn't working, right? We hired the innovation team, and then they fired the innovation team, and then they hired the new shiny person who was gonna take us to the next century, and then they left because we weren't moving fast enough. So many organizations will go through this trying to make the connections with all the good stuff we've talked about today and not be able to do it. And it's so frustrating for those of us who are trying to affect change. It can be, you know, talk about damaging to our health. I think that we're, you know, the 120,000 people that we lost per year because of workplace stress, I think it's change agents, yes? Probably? I think so. I think this could be a whole new field for us to get into. But anyway, the beauty of this, I call this the change reaction delay factor here. Right at the moment that we say forget it is probably just the moment that people start to get it. And if we leave at that moment, we've just tilled the ground and aerated it and prepared the soil and put the lime down. I've never done that in my life, but I understand it's something you do. But we put all of that down, and they're ready. They're finally ready. But we're exhausted. We are absolutely exhausted, and we're ready to go. But what we need to do at that very moment is go right back to the beginning and talk about the exciting change that they are finally ready to understand, listen to, embrace, and move on with. Change reaction delay factor. I have this up on my wall to point to whenever managers or leaders or employees are talking about the challenge of change. So what do we do, right? Do we just go back to the beginning and say, okay, let me start again? There's another way that we've started to get some good results from. And how do we do that? How do we get them to make personal connections where they are, when they're ready, to capitalize on that moment that they're ready to hear? Because before you get to that forget it stage, there are a bunch of folks, maybe a third of the folks, who've really glommed on and they're excited and they want that change to happen. They're even getting frustrated because they're like, what about the 2/3 of us who aren't getting it? What are we doing about them, right? So that's the chaos of that mid-change portion of the program. So the question is, how do we get them to start making their own personal connections when the time is right? And we've been hearing a lot about neuroscience recently. Anybody kind of dabble in the neuroscience stuff? David Rock's stuff, motivation factor, that kind of thing? A few of you. So how can we do that? We can engage the brain of the individual. And that's what we're going to talk about for the rest of this talk, engaging the brain. For those of you familiar with emotional intelligence and neuroscience, neuropsychology in general, there's three areas of the brain. One, that's survival instinct. And I think most of us understand that people hate change. Humans hate change. We're built to not like change. And our instincts are to either fight it or resist it or withdraw from it. At work, our experience with change is often not awesome, right? So it happened and we weren't consulted, or it happened and it wasn't good for us, or it happened and nobody else came along. And this is kind of that mid-emotional intelligence part of the brain where we think about our memories and how we feel about our circumstances. And then we have the more human brain, the rational brain, where we actually can do some visioning and analysis and planning and decision making. We can kind of tap into our talents and move forward. And what we tend to find is that we're asking people to engage in that rational level of the, hey, isn't this cool? Envision how we're going to be. Let's plan what we're going to have to develop in terms of skills. Think about how this is going to impact you. We're engaging folks up in that third, more developed part of their brain when they are stuck in the instinctual resistance and repulsion from what you are even talking about. And we need to make that whole connection to get them from instinctual resistance to really engaging and embracing the change that we're going to be going through. So how do we do that? There are a couple of tools that we've been putting in place at NFPA that are meant to engage the whole person. And this comes from adult learning theory, it comes from change management. This is not new information. But thinking about, what does this change mean to me, the individual employee? How do I feel about it, and what am I going to do about it? And so when we take the employee view of how do I want to be engaged, it's going to be different for every single person. As we did our continuum, some of you are looking forward to a new job, new office, new pen, new priorities, and others of you would prefer a stick in the eye, right? So we're going to engage you guys differently, but depending on who you are. But how can we do that with 300, 600, 3,000, 30,000 employees? We can't do that, right? So we need to give some tools to the employees to help us get them there. So I'm just going to introduce two tools that we have used to do this. One, Lego Serious Play. Has anybody experienced Lego Serious Play? Oh, a couple of hands. All right. Anybody who raised their hands? Yay, nay, liked it? No? Yeah?
Yes, I thought it was engaging, and this was several years ago
Yeah.
at a conference, but
Right.
yes, I thought it was productive and interesting.
Good. All right. So right there, I was like 99.9% sure I was going to get a positive, because if you do it right, I mean, it's really cool. So yes, these are Legos. These are Legos that your kids or your nephews or your nieces have that you step on in the morning at 3 o'clock in the morning, and how, I don't know if you've had that experience, but I have. But Lego Serious Play, it is a method by which teams come together in real time, not sitting around a table talking about what they want to do or what they want to build or how they want to change, but standing up over a table with Legos, building together what they want to see in the world, that they're going to create together. And it's a very serious methodology. It is rooted in neuropsychology, in that when you need to build something, you're engaging, if you're using both hands, you're engaging both sides of the brain. You are connecting tangibly with the work and the thoughts that you're doing. You're creating something that exists in the world that you can talk to. It kind of depersonalizes stuff. So as a team, if you're working through conflict, you can talk about the model or the issue that is literally on the table. So you make models with meaning and metaphor and analogy. And it taps the power of story. So you can talk about how you feel about something or what you want to create in the organization, and you tell a story about it, which is meaningful and memorable to the people around the table. It also, because you're playing with Legos, helps to make some personal and interpersonal connections, which is a nice side effect. So we used this model with every single employee in our organization. Again, only 325. But what we did was, as we introduced the idea of transforming literally every fiber of NFPA's being, we wanted to make sure employees knew where we were changing to, what our vision was, why we were going there, what was driving us to make these decisions, and how they could personally themselves connect with that strategy wherever they were. So we actually had put out for all employees. We did about 9 sessions of a large group each, and did small group breakouts and that kind of thing. But we had in the room with us the model that the senior team had built out of Legos using the same methodology to put words and story to our vision. So we actually brought that to the employees. They got to view and hear the story of the vision and the direction and how we were going to get there using the model. And then they were actually facilitated through a series of exercises that allowed them to build their own models that they were then able to tell stories about. How do their skill sets connect or align with our strategy? How might their department evolve to meet the new needs of NFPA of the future? And that was one neuropsychologically aligned tool that we used to engage people where they were with their individual ideas of what change meant for them. So that was one way that we did that. Another way another tool that we used is something called Motivation Factor, which also engages the brain in a little bit of a different way. What you see on the right-hand side is what they call the hierarchy of motivation. It has 4 levels, the bottom level being energy, kind of how you feel about engaging or disengaging from something. The 2 middle ones are needs and talents. Those are very much rooted, the needs anyway, are very much rooted in emotional intelligence. What kind of tends to trigger an uncomfortable feeling in you? Do you have a need for freedom and you're being hemmed in? Do you have a need for control and you've got a freedom-loving boss? Do you have a need to be heard and you're constantly being interrupted or dismissed? So what's kind of getting in the way of you feeling engaged is where needs come from. Talents, very much like StrengthsFinder, drawing from what are those inherent qualities that you can't help but contribute with, that really make you feel good when you connect. And then purpose, why are you here? What are you getting out of your work? What are you giving to it in that mutual contribution? And the more you understand how to work with and manipulate where you're at on each of these layers, the higher level of motivation, learning, and change resilience you can experience. So we actually engage all of our employees in this work so that they can think for themselves about how engaged do they feel in the concept of change and transformation. What kind of needs might be getting triggered for them that they need to be more aware of and be able to work around? What kind of talents can we tap into from them? And when we tap into those talents, people feel more valued and appreciated and motivated. And then finally, what is their unique contribution to the journey that we're on? How will they participate during this time of transformation and chaos? What is their purpose or contribution to the act or journey of transformation? And so we've done that we've used this model in a number of different ways. And in one particular way, we decided to create an effort around transformational leadership at every level. And so every single leader whose job it is to lead, managers and leaders, went through this. We created a common transformational leadership definition. So here's our objective, to be this transformational leader. We defined thought leadership, people leadership, and results leadership, and gave a definition around that. and then asked them to observe themselves and their workplace around these leadership qualities, and then put them through that exercise of identifying their own relative energy towards transformational leadership qualities themselves, and where their energy, needs, talents, and purpose were related to that effort. So that was another program that we put in place. Again, both of these tools really adding to all of the other things that we've been doing to engage folks in our change. We communicate with intranets, a weekly newsletter. We have something called Curious and Connected, where every couple of months we have leaders at every level come together as change champions. We have a monthly management roundtable, monthly management newsletters. You do all of this work, but it's one HR department with 300 people where we're trying to just pull everybody along. And why not give folks some tools that they themselves can use to personally connect with the workplace that they are being presented with. And so a little bit of balance there where we get all of us working towards the same outcome. And we've had some good feedback from folks. They like the personal attention and the introspection that they get, having their own report and kind of seeing how all of this stuff works. And at the end of the day, we would like to change faster than we do, but we can only change as fast as the people in our midst. Yes? I'm leaving you with 3 minutes and 51 seconds back to your life.
Julie, thank you. Thank you. Caught me off guard.